Hello, my name is Joshua Lawrence, and I am here to present my 2025 summer book chat. I hope everybody's doing well. Um, what I'll be covering is dementia, and a specific rare dementia called um, Bingswanger. Um, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but I do know, however, that it is a rare form of dementia that is going to be key in this book. It's quite sad. Um, Another theme I would like to present is that I'll be sticking with a green and beige type of uh, color scheme. And there's a reason why I'm doing that, and I'll be happy to share that towards the end of our PowerPoint. So, to start off with the summary, Stolen Minds by Meyer Doenberg is essentially a memoir for her husband, Ray Doenberg, published in 1986. Uh, the then 48-year-old self-sufficient architect is hit with a rare form of dementia named Bingswanger. And devastated by the news, Meyer walks through the early decades of the 1980s, unsure of really her marriage as she experienced the gradual progressive decline of her husband, Ray. This book, however, is not fiction, of course, and is told in the real eyes of an individual wife, and but told in the first person perspective of not just a wife, but a life and a loved one turned to caregiver. Um, as studies recall, the beginning stages of this disease, we, the audience, are put in the front seat of the day-to-day observations of the medical notes, the tons of medical notes, and the visible frustration and the emotional toll that is brought onto her each day. My personal opinion on this book, when reading, it holds true to the very nature of the title. Um, so much is so much is stolen in the blink of an eye, and the keyword stolen. A father, a husband, and undoubtedly a friend. The keyword stolen is not the tragic theme of Ray Doenberg, but is the well documented time. And that keyword time, Meyer, his wife, took to write this memoir of her late husband's demise. And as this book paints the vivid image of Ray's cognitive decline due to the Binswanger's disease, we, the readers, are educated with the feeling of experiencing such a loss between the tears pouring to write these chapters. The emotional, physical exhaustion shown by their two sons and Mara herself ultimately. You know, Ray goes through this parallel of what I've seen through my time working in aged care. Um, around my early 20s, and so far from what I've seen, the research and the technology has improved. Considering back in the 80s, it was the research had was subpar, and I believe this book to be forever be timeless, in which it can educate those who are struggling with coping with this type of dementia or other forms. So when it comes to Ray's diagnosis or diagnoses, uh, in the management in managing it after, he didn't really have one. Like I've referred to back in our first couple of slides, uh, in the 1980s, the research for this disease and um, wasn't very subpar. Uh, they they misdiagnosed him, and with that being said, his psychological evaluations um, were done, of course, but they mistakenly took it as some type of mental illness and a burnout from his day-to-day job, ultimately a midlife crisis. And his wife said, no, like, I know my husband, and this is not it. So Myra took extensive notes, each doctor visit, and recorded his behavior changes, his lapses in his memory, disorientation, and through her advocacy, Myra faced many hurdles when dealing with the healthcare system. So she took it upon herself to basically manage all this. But she didn't get a proper answer medically. And through her her fortunate loving heart, she had to take all this herself. So it was essentially, it was like her battling these multi-million dollar healthcare infrastructures to try to get an answer from her husband, an answer that she could not find. So all in all, Myra became Ray's primary caregiver, and with that, it became hygiene and upkeeping his dignity. Because at the end of the day, he is a 40-year-old man, and no 40-year-old man ever thought to experience this. And so it's quite sad. So moving forward, in response to the previous slide, individuals who deal with cognitive issues are often overlooked, misdiagnosed, and misunderstood. That's why it's very important for family members to be involved as much as possible during their loved one's assessments and evaluation, as Myra was with her husband. And although in the 1980s, again, research on Alzheimer's wasn't up to par in today's standards, advocacy and now not change is very much needed when speaking with clinicians in any form of healthcare infrastructure. And if you're feeling too overwhelmed with who overwhelmed with choosing the right doctor or memory care unit and even medication slash practice, get an opinion, get a second opinion. That's one thing that we as individuals, we feel very intimidated by the people with the white coats and their plaques on their walls, and just feeling intimidated with these big, bold terminologies that they're just throwing at us. And I feel like that's where we, as patients, and just for our loved ones, we just like, okay, we're just going to accept everything that is being said. When in reality, we have the choice and the ability to speak to somebody else, get a second opinion, you know? And Myra, with all due respect, she did not take any slack from any of these doctors and their superficial explanations. She knew what was wrong for her husband again, and she was not going to take any and anything, um, and that was so special. And as we look at the emotions that were evoked in this book while reading, grief is probably the number one thing that is felt throughout this book. Uh, Part of the reason why it was so hard for me to just take that all in, because it's not even just reading it, but envisioning it in your mind. That is the most painful thing. People deal with this every day with their loved ones. This is a constant theme throughout the book while reading, of course. And it isn't really the death part that hits, it's the suffering and the slow progress to death between a husband, a wife, and an overall family. As Ray's cognitive declines, I can feel the pain and relate to Ray as a son who has a father who's getting up there in age. I cannot put myself in Myra's shoes mentally. Um, I hope I don't have to. Anger, as I read this book, is also a common theme, especially with the constant dismissive nature that the healthcare system gave, where it's supposed to help its citizens, it's supposed to help the American people, um, and it just makes you think as a future healthcare provider, like, what can I do? You know, empathy too. Um, as much as it seems like the book was written with sadness, I understood that this was a memoir that was bittersweet and something that could be read by many others to give them hope. And as Myra was a very resilient, caregiving wife throughout the end, she was indeed the embodiment of her wedding vows. And as a person who worked in aged care, we must remember to be compassionate always. The personal value I took from this book reminded me of a resident who I once knew who moved in around the age of 55 to our reflection unit. He was a successful doctor and he had so many credentials. I mean, so much credentials and articles in his name. You know, still in his prime, 55 years, still strong. He ends up in a reflection unit, like I said. Now, I see or read cases like these, and I'm constantly reminded of my own father, who is at the age of 75 and still going strong. But while I'm in my 20s, still enjoying my life and preparing myself for every each opportunity, I'm just reminded that one day all of that could just stop because how quick life comes at you fast, you know. And working in this unit, I seen his wife come in every day and leave with tears all down her face, and seeing that, and I wish I could say her name, but I can't. But seeing that, it just reminded me of this woman in this book. I mean, you know, like Myra, she was just so she was there for her husband throughout it all, and the RCA's and I, we would always console her after every time after dinner. It started to get better each day, but throughout time, you know, we made her know that it was appropriate to know that she's not alone. This book is relevant to communication disorder students because it presents the aspect of a caregiver in the medical setting, and it gives the visual symptoms of dementia. Um, Cognitive loss, communication, aphasia, Medicare Advantage, commercial insurance, Medicaid, so all different types of insurance claims, um, and you know, elder abuse. Once a person becomes a resident at a home, they are titled under an elder, a resident. So, or resident abuse rather, because at this point they have a disability and they can't really fend for themselves. They can't talk. Most of them can't even speak for themselves. And as a communication disorder student, these are the things that we must talk about, especially if our goal is to either work in aged care or um, any disability home, you know? So I feel like this book makes me want to become a better speech pathologist in the future, and I feel like it will be. Um, there's so many forms of dementia, and though I've worked at many aged care homes as a waiter, as an activity assistant, um, as a future clinician, if I'm focusing on aged care rehabilitation, it's my duty to educate myself. But not only on that, but also on the insurance companies and these billion-dollar insurance infrastructure, these healthcare industries that block people from getting the services they need. Um, and to be an advocate for those people, I need to know myself. Um, and overall, just understanding every patient's needs and concerns, and recognizing the different communication patterns that multiple people need, um, and remembering their dignity and their integrity and respecting their stories and not sharing it with friends and families and coworkers. And yes, I think this book is great for anybody who's going to be a clinician in healthcare. It provides an emotional ride for the reader, and I believe this book could be essential for a spouse or a child whose family member is going through this pain. This book rated 4.9 out of 6 on Amazon, and I'm not surprised. It's a great book. So, final thoughts. I mean, there's nobody virtually live to comment, but just to go back to my first point in my first slide, the reason why I chose this green and beige um, pattern is to just pay homage to my previous job in LCB Senior Living, where they had a great idea where we wore green polo and beige pants because that was they said that was like the last colors a person sees when going blind. They also it also helped us, you know, identify ourselves within the unit, especially when we worked in the memory care unit. The residents could see us better and identify us more. Instead of dark colors that kind of washes us out as just workers, you know. So I just wanted to share that. I really did enjoy this book. I'm really enjoying this class. I'm learning so much, and yeah, thank you so much.